Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hinei Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
Now I can think. Right. So let's start. Page 214, but a different page in that one. V'amnam. Kasher yadanu hayas kol advar ma'ela nolad mehester panim panav yizbarach o meha'aras panav. So he says that everything that we're talking about, meaning the interaction of the body and the soul, it's dependent on Hashem either revealing Himself or hiding Himself. Al kein naimar. Therefore we say Shakadosh Baruch Hu machlef hanhagaisav lefi ma shetzarich lebriyasa lechamish madrigas eila. So that means Hashem changes the way that He interacts with the world depending on one of these 5 situations. So you have certain, we said the lowest fifth where we are now, that's where the body is dominant. So when the body is more dominant, that means Hashem is hiding Himself more than, let's say, the top level where the soul is totally dominant and there's a body, but the body is totally subservient to the soul, and it like barely, it has an existence, but it doesn't have any influence on the soul whatsoever. It's totally subservient to the soul. In that situation, then everything is dependent on Hashem revealing Himself. Because for this lower level, Sheyachamish is the 5th lowest level, Hatachtaina Mikulam, Hine Yarba Lahanhig Behester Panav, there is an increase in Hashem hiding Himself. Umaat beharis panav, and a little bit of Hashem revealing Himself. Yening ba'alam ubervias in the 4th level, Yamida Hester v'yar behara, there becomes less of Hashem hiding Himself, v'yar behara, and more of Hashem revealing Himself. Ubeshlishis, and on the 3rd level, Yamida Hester, there's less of Hashem's hiddenness. Miyud acharin, a little after little. V'tir behara ribo yoser, and there's an increase of Hashem revealing Himself. V'chein al derech zeh, and also on this way. Ad hisalos l'madrega harishon, until you get to the highest level. She'ara tizgaber ma'od, that Hashem revealing Himself is very great. V'hester b'mashahu, and the Hashem's hiding Himself is very, very little. Ad shemibnei zeh lo yisher shlita ki'im l'Hashem levad. At that point, when Hashem's revelation is so intense, when that's so intense, there is no power that the body has over the soul at all. Nothing with the body. So we have this parallel that the more the soul has power, that's because Hashem is revealing Himself. The more the body has power, that's because Hashem is hiding Himself, so to say. And we're in this physical world where the body has the most power. The soul is kind of like, it is a prisoner in some degree to the body. And that is reflected by the fact that Hashem is hiding Himself. Okay. The soul says, why do you need these 5 levels? It's very nice you made 5 levels. Right? But why do you need them? Amar Seichel, says the intellect. And we just started Os Tzadi. I don't think that version doesn't have the letters next to the paragraphs. That was actually started by Ruchaim Freelander, who wrote this one. Not a lot of people used to learn Daas Tevunos because it was like very hard to break up, and it was just like a long dialogue without chapters, so people had difficulty. So Ruchaim Freelander, I want to say in the 1960s, he like re-edited it and put these numbers in to make it more user-friendly for people like us. Okay, Amar Seichel, says the intellect. Why are there 5 levels? Because that's the way it has to be. It's like logical like that. Because every possibility of the 5 levels has to be like that. He's going to explain. It's level after level. Because the first level, what's the highest level? That's where the body exists without having any power. The level under that is where the body has a general power. Level under that, that's when the body has some power over some details. Shlitas kol pratim. And then you have vadayin k'moshu arei chutz l'makomo. And the second lowest level is where the body has control over all the details, but the body is like a stranger in a different place. That's what we said was like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu still had a body, but when he was receiving the Torah from Hashem, he was in a place where it was a spiritual world. So even though the existence, he had the existence of a body, it was like a guest. The body was like a guest in the spiritual world. So that obviously impacted it. And then the lowest level is Shidus Kol HaPratim B'Makomo Ke'ish Sar B'Iso. The lowest level which we are on now is where the body runs everything and rules over everything, and it's like a man who rules over his house. So Elahem Chamisha Dvarim Nimshachim B'Halchim Lefi Teva Einin. And these are the 5 levels that have to be according to the reality. Ein Shach was that Raimin. You can't really bring a proof for this. It's just like he's saying it's like kind of obvious that you could have these 5 gradations. Amnum. But what do you have to know now? He's like, you have to know what I told you originally. So what he said originally is that there's really, these 5 levels can be broken down into 3. The Hainu, Shlitas HaNeshama Levad Lagamri. That's when the soul is totally in control. Now, that includes the top 3 levels. So if you had trouble understanding, like many of us did, the difference between the soul, the body having a little power over the soul, and the body having like a little power over the soul, and all of these different things, he says that really that's all one level. And he's going to explain now why he's dividing up these 5 levels into 3 levels. Shlitas Ktsas Shel Haguf, Shlitas Kol Haguf. And then we're going to have a level where the body sort of rules over the soul. And then we're going to have a level where the body totally rules over the soul. So 3 levels. One is where the soul is totally in charge. One is where the body is sort of in charge. And 3 is where the body is totally in charge. This is what you have to understand for these to understand this topic completely. Now, if we're just breaking everything down into 3, why do we need 5? But you should still remember these 5 levels. Why? Because you'll find when you're in your study of the words of our sages, you'll find they're making these 5 levels that they're mentioned. He says to understand the 5 levels, to understand certain things that you're going to find in the words of the sages, you're going to have to know these 5 levels. So now, we're not going to do it this week, but next week we'll talk about how the general 3 levels, how they relate to human history. We're going to find that there are 3 general stages in human history. One is the world as it exists now. Then it says, Chazal say that in the 7th millennium, that after the year 6000, so what are we in now? 5782. So in a few hundred years, the world is going to be destroyed, and it's going to be recreated. So in the 7th millennium, that's when the body will have some impact on the soul, but the soul will really be a dominant force. And then after that, the world's going to be recreated where the soul is totally the dominant force. So those are the 3 stages of the world, and that's where next week, God willing, we will learn about how these stages, how they work with the 3 levels we mentioned. And what's going to be interesting is that we're really not going to learn so much about the world when it's going to be recreated, because these are like spiritual worlds, and we really can't understand details about it. We can just talk about it in general sense. When it comes to this world, the Ramchal and the rest of the Sefer is going to spend a lot of time talking about the world as it exists now, because that we can understand. We're living in it. But he's going to write that to understand the spiritual world and what it means that the soul is totally ruling over the body and stuff like that, that's a little harder to understand. It's only going to be talked about in general